One kid killing the parents is a bad seed. Two kids killing the parents is a bad family.
Okay, so you found Brendan inside the house?
Yeah, and he was playing with two other girls inside
Okay.
the house. It was a new house being built, so anyway, the police showed up almost as soon as I got there, and I, not being aware of the situation, didn't get out of the house quick enough. But I ran because I was scared, and the police got Brendan and I and asked us where we lived. And I told him where I lived, and Brendan went to his house, and he told me to go back to my house and that the police was going to go talk to my parents. And so
Okay.
I hid out in the forest, and I heard the policeman talking to my brother.
Okay, and what did your brother, so you heard the policeman telling your brother that you had been in this house?
Yes.
Okay. And what happened after that told you that Lyle was your friend?
Well, I heard the policeman saying to Lyle that a little kid like me at the time should not be in this house because there could be, he said, hobos and bums at the time, and I was just so afraid that Lyle was going to tell Mom and Dad. I was sure of it, and I figured that he had to. And so I didn't say anything to Lyle, and Lyle didn't say anything to me, and I wrote out a big, long entry in my journal and left it on the table so that my parents would see it before they got really angry at me and understand the situation.
Well, I don't understand. You wrote an entry in your journal about what?
About what happened that night.
Where you would...
Just pretending it was my diary, but leaving it open on the table.
So that you could explain how you wound up in the house?
So I knew my mom would snoop and read, so she would just read it and understand what happened before Lyle told Mom and Dad what happened.
Okay.
But he never did.
And you did that for what purpose? Why did you want her to know what happened before Lyle told her?
So that I wouldn't get punished as bad.
Okay. So what happened?
Lyle never told Mom and Dad.
And how did that make you feel about him?
I began to realize that Lyle was on my side.
Now let's go back then to the tennis court when you're 11 or 12. What happened between yourself and your father that day?
I was on the same side of the court with Lyle, with Dad, and Lyle was on the other side. And I wasn't moving my feet enough. I had to keep my feet moving for all the time I was on the tennis court, and I was tired, and I was dragging my feet. Finally, he just got too angry with me after telling me enough times to move my feet.
Who's he?
My father.
Okay.
So he just grabbed me and lifted me up onto the fence a few feet off the ground and ripped my shirt. And Lyle came running over, and he wasn't going to interfere with Dad, but he just said, it's okay, calm down, quietly behind Dad. Dad didn't hear me.
He's making this gesture to whom?
To me.
To try to calm you down?
Yeah, I was crying.
And why do you think he was trying to calm you down?
Because he loved me.
Objection sustained. The answer's true.
Okay. Would your father react in a certain way if you were crying versus if you weren't crying when he was angry?
Yes, if I wasn't crying, it wouldn't be as bad. And so he was trying to get me to stop crying so Dad wouldn't.
Okay. And what happened after that?
Dad threw me in the basement and just lectured me. Nothing really happened that bad.
And why does this stick out in your mind? Why is this so significant that your brother did this?
Because the incidences where my brother helped me, either with other people or with my mom and dad, just really stick out in my mind. I don't know why.
Okay. Was there another incident with your father that involved some plate glass doors?
Yes.
And what was that about?
Dad was again angry at me because I wasn't playing well on the tennis court, and he was over my shoulder yelling at me in my ear, and I just said, all right, and he just, not something you're supposed to do, and he just grabbed me and slammed me into the glass.
And what happened?
The glass shattered, and he just grabbed me again and slammed me through it all the way until the glass broke and I fell on my butt.
Was your mother home when this happened?
She was in the kitchen.
And did she respond to it?
At first she jumped up, not knowing what happened, and then she saw it was just Dad throwing me through the glass, so she didn't say anything.
And was the glass cleaned up?
Yes, I did that.
Did someone order you to clean it up, or did you just...
Dad told Mom to tell me to clean up the glass.
And did that happen?
Yes.
Was Lyle there on that occasion?
I don't remember Lyle being there.
Was Lyle someone you admired as a child?
Yes, very much so.
Why?
Because he was bigger, he was smarter, he was better looking, he was everything that I wanted to be, according to my parents and according to me.
You did want to be like him.
Yes.
You admired him.
Mm-hmm.
And did you feel from 11 on that he was a good brother to you?
Overall.
Yes.
Now I'd like to turn your attention to when the family moved to California. You've heard a lot of different witnesses, including your brother, testify about your parents' relationship over the years. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, did you notice any significant differences in, first of all, the relationship between your parents after the move to California?
Oh, yes.
And did you notice any significant difference in the way your mother related to you after you moved to California?
Yes.
All right, let's start with this. When you first got to California, you said you lived in the Oakwood Apartments.
Yes.
And that was the time when you said your parents were talking about divorce.
Divorce.
And affairs, and your mother was crying a lot, right?
Yes.
At some point, Mr. Menendez, did the discussion about divorce stop?
Yes.
And at some point, did you notice a difference in the way your mother talked to your father?
Yeah, the whole relationship in the family sort of changed.
Okay, would you tell us, first of all, what was different?
Basically, my mom's behavior and my dad's behavior toward my mom.
Okay, let's start with that, the way your mother behaved towards your father and the way your father behaved towards your mother.
All right, can you pin it down a little bit?
Can you give me a time? Is this something that suddenly
After
appeared?
we moved to California, I would say as soon as the divorce stopped, they stopped talking about the divorce.
How long after you moved to California did they stop talking divorce, at least to the extent you could hear it?
It's 6 months.
Okay, so after the first 6 months, you noticed this difference in their relationship.
Yes.
And would you describe what was different?
My mom was very depressed a lot and crying a lot, but she also got a lot more angry than she had done before, and she got a lot more angry at Dad, more vocal toward Dad. And Dad would back down. He wouldn't fight her. Before, he used to just go and hit her, but now he would just back down and not yell back so much. Sometimes he'd go, "All right, Kitty, all right," but he wouldn't really be aggressive with her.
Was that different than Kitty, which is what he used to do?
Well, he did that when he got so angry that he was really, really angry with her, but it happened very, very infrequently.
In the earlier days, would he just cut her off like that all the time?
He would cut her off, or he would just yell at her, and I mean, it depended. If we were in the house, and there were two different types. If we were in the house, he would yell at her, and he would get angry at her, and he would hit her. If we were outside, and she was yelling or saying things that he did not want her to say to different people, then he would shut her up like that.
That's the earlier times. Now we're in California. Now she's yelling at him and he's backing down.
He would always do that, though. He would always say Kitty if he didn't want her to do things.
Okay, but I'm talking about now in California. She's yelling at him and he is backing down, you said.
Yes.
And that's different.
Yes, it's different.
And what did you think had caused this difference?
Well, I had suspected that it had to do with the divorce and Louise.
Okay. And you suspected what about the divorce in Louise? Divorce talk had stopped. So
Yeah.
what did you think this meant?
I didn't exactly know what it meant because I didn't understand why it would be, the relationship would change to the extreme that it did over just this 8-year affair that Dad, I mean, Dad had a serious affair and Mom found out, and she said basically, from the parts that I could hear through the wall, that if they divorced, he would not want to get a divorce. But it seemed too drastic a change. I didn't quite understand what it fully meant.
When you were growing up, did your mother appear to be afraid of your father or not afraid of your father?
Afraid of my father.
Did she appear as afraid of your father in California?
No, not at all.
Now, you have described, and many other people have described, that your mother would have these very severe outbursts in the early years in Pennington.
Yes.
Okay. Did she have similar outbursts in California?
Yes.
And were they less frequent in California, more frequent?
I would say more frequent.
When your mother would have these outbursts, I mean, all the way through, would she necessarily be rational in the things she was angry about or the things she was saying?
Definitely not. A lot of things started to change with that.
With what?
With Mom and her moods, and she became a lot less rational. For the first time I saw her drinking a lot more than she had before. She was taking a lot of drugs and a lot of the pills that she had to take, and she just became severely irrational at times.
Would she say things that made no sense?
She would say and do things that made no sense.
Okay. Now, the last summer, the summer of 1989, I think you've already testified that you noticed that she was not taking her medication.
Yes.
Rephrase the question.
Okay. Did you notice a change in your mother's pill taking over that last summer?
Yes.
And what was the change?
She wasn't taking her medication.
She wasn't taking the pills.
Yes.
And did that improve her level of, was she calmer? Was she more rational without the medication?
No, I wanted her to start taking it. I didn't say that to her, but I didn't like the fact that she wasn't taking it because her moods became worse.
And you said you wouldn't say that to her. Why wouldn't you say it to her?
Because I didn't want to be the subject of her harshness again. I just didn't want to focus too much attention on me. I try to do that as little as possible.
Did you ever have the kind of relationship with your mother where you could talk to her about personal things?
No.
Now, when was it, Mr. Menendez, when you first heard anything about your mother and poison?
In the Calabasas house.
Do you remember what year?
Yeah, it was that same year that things changed. It was late '87. It was after I broke up with Kirsten.
And when you were living in the Beverly Hills house, was there an occasion when your father brought up the possibility that your mother was seeking to poison you all?
Yes.
Now, didn't that seem kind of bizarre to you, the idea that your mother would poison you? And didn't you just reject that out of hand as impossible?
No, I pretty much by that time thought my mother was capable of anything. I mean, that was after she bought the gun and said what she said there. I mean, I knew my mom was she was very suicidal, she was very depressed, and she was capable of anything because she was very angry.
Well, did you think she was capable of killing herself?
Yes.
And did you think she was capable of killing other people?
Whoever she was angry with at the time.
So she was both depressed and angry?
Yes.
When you were a child and a teen living back east, were you afraid of your mother?
I was afraid, but pretty much just afraid of her outbursts, afraid of getting hit, not of anything like that.
Well, during those last months in California, did you become afraid of your mother in a different way?
Well, I was afraid of my mother living in the Beverly Hills house when she stopped taking her medication, for sure. But before then, I mean, when Dad said to me what he said in May, I knew he was taking it seriously, and he didn't think she was going to do anything right away. But he just thought that he would threaten me with it, and
But my question
lost your
is,
question.
you said that earlier you were afraid of your mother's anger, okay? Now, were you afraid of her, say, the last year?
Yes.
Was it the same fear? Were you just afraid of her anger, or was it a different kind of fear?
Then in Pennington?
Yes.
Oh yes, much different.
And what was the difference?
And she could hurt me on purpose rather than by accident. When I was in Pennington, she would throw things at me, or she would do things, and if I got hit in the head, it would be by accident. I knew she didn't mean to do that, even though she did it. But in California, it was different. I knew she could do things on purpose.
Now, you've discussed a difference in the relationship between your parents, okay, where your mother did not seem to be afraid of your father anymore. Was there a difference in the way your mother treated you?
Yes.
And could you just generally summarize what that difference was in California?
She wouldn't protect me from Dad anymore at all. In fact, she would usually take his side in things.
Okay, now I haven't heard much about, and we haven't heard much about her protecting you from Dad before.
Counsel, let's not ask questions that way.
What do you mean by her protecting you anymore? When had she protected you?
Well, it wasn't. I don't remember what I just said, but before, she would, when Dad would get angry at me, she would sometimes say, Jose. She would not get involved, and she would allow Dad to do what she did. Now she would take an active role, is what I'm trying to say.
She join in with him?
Yes.
Did she seem to be more like Dad's ally in California or more like his ally in New Jersey?
Rephrase the question.
Yes. Did your mother seem to be more or less like your father's ally when you lived in California?
More. In Pennington, she wasn't Dad's ally. She was afraid of Dad, and she would lie and to get me in trouble, to get the trouble off her, which I understood, but in California it was different. She was more joined with Dad.
Okay. And now if we could, Mr. Menendez, turning to that Thursday night, that last Thursday night, when your mother told you that she knew what your father had been doing with you all those years. Do you remember that?
Objection, that misstates the evidence.
Rephrase the question.
How did you interpret the things that your mother said to you in the den that Thursday night when you were on your way to the guest house?
That she knew about Dad and I.
And that she had known?
And that she said she had always known.
Okay. And to you always meant all those years, didn't it?
Objection, David.
I really,
Objection sustained. Ask
What did that mean to you?
that she knew and that she had known, she had always known. She said, I really wasn't thinking about all of those years. I just thought about the fact that she knew that my dad was doing this all the time, and I was in shock.
Now, after you talked to your brother that Thursday night and you found out what he had said to your father and you felt that you were going to be killed, okay? What did you think was your mother's interest in keeping the secret secret?
She had a big interest. My mom in California had become really, the image had been a big thing with her. She liked to cater parties. She liked to have parties at the Beverly Hills house, and this would destroy everything that she had ever worked for.
Did you think her interest was any different than your father's interest in keeping?
No, of course not.
So it was the same?
Yes, it's about keeping the secret.
Now, Mr. Menendez, I want to return you back to Sunday night, August 20th, 1989. Okay? Okay?
Yes.
I think we stopped before when the police arrived at the house. And do you recall what emotional condition you were in when the police arrived at the house?
I was hysterical.
Was that genuine hysteria?
Yes.
And do you know what had caused it?
Excuse me?
Do you know what had caused it? What made you...
Seeing my parents. I think also shooting them caused it. Just the whole night.
Were you happy about what you had done?
No, it was beginning to hit me what I had done when I went back to the house that night, and I couldn't accept that.
My question was, were you happy about it?
No, I was not happy.
Have you ever been happy about it?
No.
Now, on the way back to the house from Santa Monica, did you and your brother discuss the things that you were going to tell the police once you called them?
Yes.
Did you discuss not calling the police and just leaving town?
No.
Did you discuss, let's go back home and make it look like a burglary?
No.
Did you discuss, let's go back home, get the guns from the closet, load them up, and stick them in the den?
Objection, José.
Overruled.
Do you understand the question?
No.
Did
I
you
didn't.
discuss with your brother, well, let's go back to the house, let's go up to Mom's closet, let's get the rifles, let's load them up, let's stick them down in the den and make it look like
No.
they were shooting? So you didn't think of any of those things?
No.
What were the 3 things that you and your brother discussed telling the police?
That we went to the movies.
Okay, that's
and-
one.
And that we...
Counsel, is there some reason to believe that there are just 3? Why don't you rephrase the question?
Were there just 3 points that you wanted to make with the police?
I don't really remember how many points there were.
Why
there
don't
was
you tell us what the things were that you and Lyle were going to say to the police?
that we went to the movies, and then we went to meet Perry at the Civic Center. And I remember Lyle...
Just that you went to the movies,
yes.
that you went to meet Perry at the Civic.
And then I went home for my ID.
Right. Is that it?
No, there's one other.
What's the one other?
He told me to say that we parked in the back.
Okay, so there were 4 things.
Yeah, I guess that's all. Yeah.
4 things. The thing is, you told the police that you parked in front. I mean, you did park in front.
Yes.
So you didn't tell the police you parked in back.
Is that a question?
Did you
Rephrase
tell, I'm sorry, did you tell the police you parked in back?
Yes.
But your car's parked in front.
it. Counsel, let's not argue. Ask a question.
I don't understand. Perhaps I'm not understanding. Did you park the car in front when you went back?
When we went back, yes, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when we left the house, Lyle wanted me to have it very clear that we parked in back because he figured that somebody had to have seen us run out of the house that night.
Okay, so you're saying that you were supposed to tell the police that when you left your house that night to go to the movies, you pulled out from the back.
Yes.
Okay. And did you go over and over on the ride home these 4 things that you were supposed to tell the police?
No, not at all. Lyle was worried.
Well, you were worried about whether you could tell them that story, weren't you?
Objection, leading.
Sustained.
Were you worried about whether you could tell that story?
Yes, Lyle... that's
Were
what-
you worried about
Yes, I was worried about that.
And why were you worried about that?
Because I was not thinking very clearly, and I didn't know what would come out of my mouth at that time.
And did your brother appear to be worried about whether he'd be able to tell the story?
He was worried about that, but he was also worried on the way down to the station whether... He asked me, are you going to be able to do this? If you're not, let me know.
Did you go over the points?
No.
You remember going back to the car after you were at the police station, later that morning, in order to remove anything that was left in it?
That's why we went back.
Yes. And do you remember doing
Yes.
that? And do you remember finding anything, you personally, inside the car?
We weren't allowed access to the car right away.
Yes, eventually were you?
We went back at 5:30, and then they told us to come back. And we did around 8.
Yes.
And we found some things, yes.
Yes. Did you personally find something
Yes.
in the car? Yes?
Yes.
What did you find?
An empty shell
And where was that empty shotgun shell?
underneath the front seat. Underneath the front seat,
So it was in the passenger compartment of the car.
yes.
Now, you were interviewed at the police station by Sergeant Edmonds. You remember him?
Yes.
And how did he treat you?
He was very nice.
And at the end of your interview with him, oh, and did you remember the 4 things you were supposed to tell him?
Yes.
And when you finished talking to him, and you left his company, did you say something to your brother?
Yes.
And what was the point of your saying what you said to your brother?
So that he would know that I didn't tell them what happened, and then I just told him, told Sergeant Edmonds what we had worked out.
The 4 things.
Yes. I just said, it's okay, you can go in and talk to him. I didn't,
Yes,
I
and
made it through.
That was the signal, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Objection, meeting is
Objection sustained, the answer is stricken.
Was that a
Counsel
signal?
would move a lot quicker if you would not.
Now, at the end of the tape with Sergeant Edmonds, do you recall what happened to you emotionally?
Yes.
What?
I broke down.
Okay. And was that real?
Yes.
And do you remember asking him something?
Yes.
And what did you ask him?
I asked him if my parents were dead,
Well, why'd you ask him that?
because I wanted to hear it from a police officer. I had trouble accepting that.
But you knew they were dead.
I knew they were dead, but there's something, it was just, I couldn't accept that.
Did you think that you were in good shape mentally and emotionally after
I wasn't.
Sunday?